Good evening and welcome to the Gilman Central School District Board of Education meeting for July 21st, 2020. If you could all please silence your cell and recite the pledge. I pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States
of
of America
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right, so this is a special meeting, and first on the agenda tonight we have special inspections and construction materials. So I'll turn it to Neil.
Okay, thank you, Seema. Yes, before you is a resolution to approve Dente Group to provide special inspections and construction materials testing services for the first phase of the school district's $30.9 million capital construction project. And I've attached a summary of the pricing, and it will be in accordance with those unit prices noted in the paper.
Okay, so can I have a motion to accept the RFP?
So moved.
Barb?
Second.
Julie?
Second.
Are there any comments or questions for Neil? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes 9-0. And next, for emergency purchase of supplies and materials, back to you, Neil.
Okay, thank you. As you know, COVID-19 is here, and we're obviously having to buy equipment, materials, and supplies related to that effort. So I will read you the emergency resolution. It's a purchasing resolution. So that in accordance with Board Policy 6700R, Board of Education determines that an emergency situation has and continues to exist for the purchase of mandated and recommended materials, equipment, and supplies to ensure the health and safety of students, staff, and visitors resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, and declares that such purchases will not be subject to competitive bidding requirements. However, the district will endeavor to make purchases at the lowest possible cost to the extent practicable under the circumstances. And I think, as you all know, we have a number of supplies: hand sanitizer, face masks, non-contact thermometers, disinfectant sprayers, gloves, polycarbonate shields, if we can get them, all still very much in short supply or with fluctuating prices, or we think we have an order and then the quantity is not the right quantity, or unit of measure, I should say, smaller than what we were led to believe. So we just need to have this resolution in place so that we can get materials, equipment, and supplies on hand and ready for the reopening of school.
Neil, could I ask you a question?
Sure.
Wasn't there something I read in the paper, someone in our district, one of the young people was making 3D masks, or making those shields out of from our 3D printers?
Yep.
Can we do that?
We can. I'm not sure if they meet all of the specifications or not. I'm not sure where that stands right now, but there are sources out there for different items. We just need to make sure we have sufficient supplies and that they will meet the needs of our employees.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if they're in
Sure.
short supply and we can make them, and they are, they
Yes.
do meet specifications, that might be a way of providing it. So it might be something we want to find out quick so we can start making them.
Yes, that was a while ago, so I haven't heard
right.
about that recently, but
Right.
face shields was one of those items.
Yep.
I have
Neil,
a question, but do we need a motion first?
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have a question too, but do we need a motion first to talk about this? Because we'll be voting on it, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Sorry.
can I have a
Sorry,
motion to, that's okay. Can I have a motion to approve this emergency purchase of supplies and materials?
So moved.
Gloria, second, Blanca. Go ahead, Rebecca, you can ask your question and I'll ask.
I was just wondering if you've had trouble ordering them. I mean, a lot of those emergency supplies are really hard to find.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why we're looking at this particular resolution. We are out with a number of vendors. We are out with BOCES has some of this available too, so we're working through them. We're working with other suppliers. It's day to day, it's item by item, sometimes hour by hour, but trying to find the items that we need the availability of the items. A lot of it is they may advertise they have them. When it's time to go place the order, they're not in stock. So that's a struggle we have. Pricing also fluctuates. That's another factor. Or a recent one was we thought we were getting hand sanitizer, I believe it was, and the quantity that was advertised and what we had ordered, in fact, was a different quantity size, that they didn't have the right information for that product and price quantity. So it's still a very difficult market to find these types of items. Cliff Nooney is doing a fantastic job out there working with a number of suppliers and trying to make sure that we have quantities of everything that we need available to us. But it's a challenge with everybody looking for the same items at the same time.
Right.
Neil,
Thank
does that include those plexiglass shields or something? You know, not the ones you wear on your face, but
Right.
that you would put between a teacher and a student? Part of it?
Well, those shields cannot be plexiglass in schools. It has to be polycarbonate,
Okay.
which is unavailable right now.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, plexiglass is flammable, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. So New York State education requirements for school buildings, you can't have flammable materials. So they've said you can't use that. You can use polycarbonate. It's just in very short supply.
Neil, is there any, or I don't know what the latest update is about support from the state or federal government for purchasing all of these things?
Yeah, we, outside of BOCES, which we're in with a number of school districts, and that has been very helpful to us. There's a number of items that we're buying through them. Outside of that, we're really on our own. There is no other supply chain from any other entity.
Any other
But
questions?
Neil, we are keeping track of our expenses, right?
Yes, for FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Assistance, we've met with them already. We've started that process. So we will be able to be eligible for some level of reimbursement for these supplies, but that's not the supply chain side. That's basically recouping a portion of the cost.
I have a couple questions, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay? I had to switch to my laptop. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So Neil, are we approving money that you will definitely spend or that you may spend? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, say schools don't open, or say they only open for a week, are we then stuck with everything we bought? Because you're sort of stuck right now. If you don't move fast, there may not be supplies, right? But do we
Correct. And
want
this resolution is really not a money resolution. It's a competitive bidding requirement that we're talking about, competitive purchasing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what this allows us to do is, in an emergency situation, we will try our best to do competitive pricing, but if we need to jump on something, we now have that flexibility to do that if the board approves this resolution to provide the necessary materials, equipment, and supplies.
Who decides how many are necessary?
Well, Cliff Nooney is the one that's handling this, our director of facilities right now, but we do have some requirements for example, for having to supply masks potentially to students and staff, or to students and staff if they ask for one. Hand sanitizer is really going along with our reopening model. So how many classrooms do we have? Or do we need those products? And we're doing it on that basis. You know, the thermometers, we're working with our health office staff and nurses and trying to make sure we have adequate number of those that we could utilize for students, staff, and visitors as they may be needed.
Okay. So one of the reasons I ask is I know in terms of agencies at the state level that some purchases have been made and then later, you know, oh, these thermometers aren't very reliable, but they were very expensive. So I'm just trying to avoid that at our level, I guess. And so I wondered if those sorts of things would be explored, if not by us, by Cliff or someone at some point before they make the purchase and spend the money. I wouldn't want us to waste any money, just to be honest with you.
Yeah, and that's a delicate balance, as you can imagine, because we need all of these supplies for reopening. And they also, there's a long lead time and quantities may be there or may not be there. So we're in this catch-22. If we wait too long, there might not be any available and they're required for opening. If we go sooner, we may have the supplies on hand, but then we could get shut down. There is no perfect solution to all of that, but we're not buying for a year's worth. We're buying to get us into, right now, into the fall. So the start of school and maybe 6 weeks in is our initial procurement process that we're looking at. So we're trying to balance that out.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, so all in favor to approve the resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All passes 9-0. Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have our goal setting session. Reed, did you want to start? Did you want me to start?
Well, Seema, maybe you want to set the stage while I try to figure out my PowerPoint here.
Sure. I think while Marie pulls that up, I think you guys got the email I sent with the poem. I just thought I'd read it as we go into this discussion because it'll probably take some time. So it's called An Invitation to Brave Space by Mickey Scott Bay Jones. Together we will create brave space because there's no such thing as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we all have caused wounds in this space. We seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify the voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call for each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together. We will work on it side by side. I just thought it was a good poem to read because I think goal setting can be messy and people make mistakes and they're learning along the way. And so because it's a public meeting, I just wanted to make sure that it was stated that, you know, nothing is set in stone as we talk, but it's, you know, it's a work in progress. And I can see your screen, Marie.
Yep.
Okay. All righty. So let me just maybe recap a little bit of the conversation that Seema and Gloria and I had on Friday afternoon as we were trying to, you know, frame what our work would look like tonight. You know, obviously we have, you know, really just a little over an hour. So we're getting started as opposed to perhaps doing the whole kind of planning process. So here's what we came up with in terms of a kind of a little mini agenda within an agenda. So one thing we're going to start with is just a brief review of the roles and responsibilities of the Board of Education and the superintendent, and by extension, for superintendent, and it means, you know, and everybody who works for the district, and what's the work that they do and the roles and responsibilities they have. I took this from some work we had previously done with the NISBA, who worked with us a couple years ago. The other thing I just wanted to refresh everyone's memory about, well, the three of us did, was last January, we spent some time writing some board goals. Our spring got pretty disrupted. It's probably the understatement of the century. So we wrote them and then we have not done much with them. So that's what we'd like to get back to a little bit today. And the idea is to focus on 3 themes that seem to weave through those 5 goals. So we'll talk about that. And then, you know, the nuts and bolts of the work, we would hope that maybe tonight we can actually identify 3 SMART goals, and we'll talk a little bit about what a SMART goal is. And then finally, talk a little bit about what our next steps are. The only other thing I'll say before we kind of jump into this is that our entire leadership team met all day today, and are meeting all day tomorrow as well for our summer retreat. We did a combination of in our large gym and outdoors using social distancing, and had, I think, a great first day of a retreat where we're looking at issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice, and how it plays out within our school district. So we're going to continue that work tomorrow. So we definitely want to make sure that there is kind of alignment between where the board sees all of this going and then where the district sees it all going. So I just wanted to put that as an aside. So I'm going to just move along then. So this first slide really just captures the different domains of the parts of the governance team. So you see under Board of Education, you really have the 30,000 foot view of the school district with our mission and our vision, which is a goal, which is a couple of statements established by the board. Goals are there. Obviously, policy is there. We spend lots of time working on policy. The board also provides oversight to the work and evaluation. On the other side of the screen, you see under superintendent, and again, by extension, all those who work in the school district, we focus on the how, our operations, the financial management. We need to be mindful of regulations, and actually we, as the superintendent, I look at how we write our regulations to enact policy. And my role is to recommend and to advise, but that's where it ends, really. The board is the one who acts. And then as the superintendent and our leadership team, we also have the role of, enforcing laws, rules, and regulations to make sure we are, doing things the way we are supposed to do within a public school system. This next slide, I kind of like this because it puts all of those big words into, I think, questions that are easy to wrap your head around. So the Board of Education will focus on end results, like where is it that we want to be as a school district? Whereas superintendent focuses on, well, what are the best means to that end? While the board will ask what and why, and how much and how well. And the superintendent side, we ask questions like, how, when, by whom, where, the process questions. The tools of the board are our mission, our goals, our policies, our assurances, our standards. And the tools of the superintendent are things like strategies, procedures, regulations, assignments, documentation. And then lastly, while the superintendent recommends, it's the board who votes, and it's that vote that brings things to reality. So let me pause here. Are there any questions or comments or thoughts on this? Hearing none, I'll move us along. So back in January 16th, actually, which feels, I don't know about for you, but it feels like at least a lifetime ago, we spent a couple hours talking about kind of the big picture things that are on our radar as a school district. You'll recall we spent some time looking at our ESSA data. That's the Every Student Succeeds Act data that we are required to look at and respond to in various planning documents and other reporting documents. So that's where that first goal came, to advance the learning of all students with a particular focus on closing an achievement gap for our economically disadvantaged students. So if you're to look at our data right now, and that category of students who are economically disadvantaged, they are falling behind their counterparts. So we have been thinking about how do we better support those students. So that's part of what we've been working on. And number two is huge. We talked, I think, at that January meeting about our workforce and how it does not reflect our growing diverse population of students in Guilderland. We looked at data today actually in our retreat, and we're about 26% non-white as a student population in Guilderland, and we're about 1% not white in our faculty and staff. So there's a gap there. It's not an unusual gap, but it is something that we need to think about and work toward. So hence that second goal about developing and supporting a culturally responsive workforce that reflects and honors the diversity of our student body. And the idea here is this isn't just about hiring new people of color to better reflect the makeup of our students, but also the faculty, staff, and employees that we have. How do we position them to be more able to respond to our growing diverse workforce, student body? And that's largely what we talked about today. How do we get better at this? Three, I think, is probably a piece of two and one for that matter, and that is it's about professional development and how do we do that in the ways that we know best, which are research-based and job-embedded, not one-shot experiences, but things that are lasting, meaningful, and embedded in the day-to-day. Number four is particularly meaningful in this time that we're in, where so much is dependent on remote connections, but how do we support and advance the systems that protect the cybersecurity of our network and the privacy of faculty, staff, and student data? You've heard Damien speak many times about EdLaw 2D. You know, we're constantly thinking about this technological world that we so depend upon right now. And then last but not least, you know, we're always thinking about the maintenance and improvement of our facilities to provide a safe, secure, future-ready learning and working environment for everyone who walks through our doors. And, you know, we have a capital project going on now. We're seemingly always talking about how we can improve our facilities. We did that thought exchange earlier in the school year where we heard really loud and clear from our students that that is a priority for them to have more improvements to our facilities. So that's on there as well. So on Friday, when Seema and Gloria and I spoke, we really zoomed in on these three themes that are, you know, they're separate themes of things that we need to work on. And the whole notion of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice was a key topic. I spelled these out in the PowerPoint because serendipitously, our superintendent group last week had our retreat, also virtual, and we worked with a consultant on these very topics. And I included the PowerPoint in my update on Friday, but the presenters had some really good ways to think about the differences between these four words. And I found it to be very helpful in the course of that workshop, and I thought it'd be helpful for all of us in this conversation. But diversity is, you know, how many, you know, how many students of color, how many teachers of color. So it's a focus on just the numbers. Whereas equity is a look at our policies and our practices and what do we do with those differing numbers of populations to make sure they all have equal opportunity here. And then inclusion, I know we've spent a lot of time talking about inclusion in the district, but how do we make sure everyone feels like they belong? And then the last one is the social justice piece. And that's really, I think, what we heard from those young ladies, recent graduates or not so recent graduates from Guilderland Central School who kind of rang the bell that we need to be doing more around this topic. And then the other two themes are our facilities, you know, an ongoing work in progress where we have old buildings and they are in, you know, something is always in need of repair, or upgrade, particularly so if we think about what it means to be future ready. And then, of course, all that gets called into question while we're trying to prepare to reopen our schools in a pandemic, which throws lots of things on their head. And then lastly is the cybersecurity and safety. Seema or Gloria or anyone want to jump in on the thinking behind focusing on these three themes tonight?
I mean, I think you talked about, Marie, what we did in January. So we sat down, I think most of you were probably in the board then in January. We had that evening. We went over and talked about what was important based on that ESSA data and just what we thought was important for the district. And these are I think the three themes that came across. Those were in my notes from that January meeting. And knowing that, we have some time limit today, my goal or my objective, I think I shared on Friday, was that we leave today's meeting with 3 SMART goals. And these are broad themes, right? So if we want to check in and measure how the district is doing on addressing these goals, we need to have them be SMART goals, which is the next slide, is a way to measure what we're doing. Before I talk about that, Gloria, did you want to add anything?
I 3 things. I think it's really important that when we end tonight, every one of us is committed to whatever we decide is the end product, that we're committed either to the wording, the focus of these as the 3 goals or themes, and then we put them into goal statements. The second thing, I think it's important that we put in a regular way of reporting out on these goals, whether it's every single part of our agenda at every board meeting is a report on the goals, status report. What's happened since the last meeting in the last 2 weeks or whatever, so that we're constantly keeping that in front of us and in front of the community, so we can all keep each other moving forward. And then the third thing is, I'd just like to comment. I have since the report in the Altamont Enterprise, the article that was written about our conversation, some of the board members were on that conversation with the 8 young past graduates. I've heard from a few people in the community who were extremely impressed with the direction of the conversation, and they were very happy about that the district was taking this on as a focus. So I was very pleased to hear that. And I just think that we are definitely on the right track. I know we got a nice email today from 4 individuals in the community who were talking about, I thought they were reading my mind and our minds when we were talking the other day about, a task force and getting involved and making sure that we have the right voices, that we're constantly, checking our assumptions, because as we move forward, we have to be aware of some of the assumptions we might be acting under may not be accurate. So we have to have that third eye looking at it and questioning and kind of challenging us in that respect. So I think starting off with that poem, Seema, was a great idea, because this can be very difficult work, messy work, but it is so vitally important. And I know I left our meeting the other day very excited and energized by it.
Thanks, Gloria. So we'll go to the next slide, Marie, unless you wanted to add something else.
Nope, I think that was perfect. So Seema, do you want to talk about these?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, I think in the past we've talked about this, like Gloria mentioned also, we haven't had a timeline or a way to address how we'll check in. So first, I think it doesn't have to be 3 goals and limited to 3 goals, but I thought that would be a good start, at least in this hour meeting, to leave and try and aim to have 3 goals. And we can add as we need to, and that way, these are something that we can look, if it is on every agenda, let's say next this academic year, and then we have another session like this midway during the year, so we can actually see where we are in terms of addressing these goals. Because everything in the past has been pretty general, so we don't really know if we've made any progress. I think this is probably the first time where we were, I think January was like the closest time we actually came to have gone to writing some goals, and then the pandemic, at least from my, I think 5.5 years now on the board. So I think we started, and so this would be the next step to write something more specific. I think that was a good discussion that night. So you see the slide here: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, and Marie kind of put in the SMART goals into a nice table on the next slide. So, for example, a goal is create a workforce that reflects the diversity of the Gilman student body. And so it doesn't have to be this, but this is an example of what a goal could look like. So I was hoping then by tonight we could have 3 of these done. And like Lori mentioned, that we all agree on, that we, plan to work on these. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Seema, this is
Yep.
Barbara. I just had a couple of things that I wanted to throw out there.
Sure.
The number one goal that we had in January, advancing the learning of students, particularly those that are economically disadvantaged. I think we've seen, as a result of this COVID epidemic, that body of students probably suffer even more than they have when they're in school.
Mm.
And I'm a little reluctant to let go of that goal of, say, for the next 6 months, because that group of students, and particularly our special ed students, I think are going to need a little extra TLC over the next 6 months, and somehow or other woven into our goals. I'd like to see that group captured and sort of looked at by us.
I think that first, Barbara, can you hear me? Do I have the mic on? Yeah. I was wondering, Barbara, if, we talked about that first theme, diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice. That's a huge thing. And I think that's where a piece of that falls there. So that under the idea of equity, are all students, regardless of their situation, have equity, have the ability to access the materials and things like that. And I think that's where that falls, that question, and that population, that would be a specific action we would need to look at under that goal.
Okay, and the other concern that I had under the cybersecurity, again, it sort of links in with what we just talked about, as a goal that we assure all our parents that all our kids have access, to the internet.
Yeah.
I don't know how we achieve that.
Well, that's the equity.
I know we had some hotspots that, we gave out and things such as that.
Mhm.
But I think it's really important that we just don't lose that group of students. And you're saying it's going to be covered in that equity piece.
I think that's where when we flesh out, I'm just speaking for myself as I see it, the broader goal of the diversity and equity piece under there, that would be a piece that we'd have to put. We have to make sure that that group of kids, that we're working on that, so that access to the internet is an equity issue. So how are we going to make sure? I mean, I'm just speaking from myself. We didn't specifically talk about that.
So I'm just going to throw an idea out there, because I think when we looked at the ESSA data, it was clear that there were certain groups, like you talked about, Barb. There were several different groups of students that weren't being served, right? Like the way that they needed to be served. So I'm just going to put language out there. For example, if we close the academic achievement gap, right? Like, let's say that is the goal, right? Things that we would use to maybe measure, right? An example would be coming up with some instructional strategies or interventions to address this underserved population. Just putting ideas out there. So
Now, would that be considered a strategy, so that the overall goal is to create equity or access to education? And then one strategy would be to make sure everyone has access to the internet, that we'd have a series of strategies we would work on to make sure that happened. Is that how that's?
So the goal would be to close the achievement gap.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Right.
And
you need strategies to do that.
yes, so actions, activities, professional development, whatever it might be.
Okay.
Right. So if we're looking at a SMART goal, right? If we're looking at the S part, the specific goal is, what would you like to do, right? According to the infographic. we want to close the achievement gap, right? So that would be a goal. I'm not saying has to be one of our 3 goals. I'm just putting ideas out there. So tell me if you disagree. Something, a way to measure that. What would be a way to measure that? We could obviously look at the data, right? This is kind of how we came to this in the first place, is by looking at the ESSA data. So I know ESSA data is only like one data point that we wouldn't have midway during the year. And to be honest, I have no idea what kind of data we're going to have this upcoming year. So maybe identifying like what data points we would look at to see how we're closing the achievement gap.
I would be interested in hearing how our administrators are talking about that kind of thing, because from my point, I guess I'm thinking of, if that's our goal, to close the achievement gap, then I want to probably say to myself, okay, what are the strategies we could use to make sure, or to do that? And so then start to identify the strategies, and then from there look at, okay, what actions now do we have to take to make sure those strategies are implemented? And then who's going to be responsible for it? And then what is the timeline? When are we going to look at this? And then what's our target?
Isn't the strategies and stuff more the staff and the superintendent bit of it?
Well,
I don't think you get that granular.
It might be, as Barbara said, it might be to increase the ability or the availability of internet for students. It might be that, one of the things might be that.
That could be a goal. And that's it.
I see that as a strategy, but I don't
measure it and then let staff figure out if that's even possible or how it could be possible. I think, right? Kind of Marie, how kind of would go along.
So another way to think about it, because we are working on closing the achievement gap, is to think about how we provide supports to those children directly and how we provide supports to the teachers who work with them. So for example, I see our coaching model falling into this as a strategy, because what our literacy coaches do is help classroom teachers become better equipped to observe their students as learners, and then know how to respond instructionally. That will close the gap. I'll just say about the metric, we didn't take 3 through 8 exams last year, so we won't be able to use that as a benchmark. But we could use Fontes and Pinnell benchmarking data, which is used at the elementary buildings. But we're not going to have state data, and I don't know when we will.
Right. So that metric, this year might be a bit different, or maybe for a couple of years, who knows? But something will be used at the district level, whatever it is the administrators and the teachers decide, right, to measure how students are doing academically. And so that could be a data point.
Yes, I think we could turn to our leadership team and say, so what's the best metric in this current environment to see if our economically disadvantaged students are closing the gap? And it's going to differ by level. So we would have to look at, in this new environment, what data points do we actually have that would give us insight into that?
It sounds like this might be easier, not easier, but like we're doing a lot of these things already. It's not like we're going to come up with something that we're not doing already right now with, the 8 of us or 9 of us. Maybe we just need to come up with the data point and then an enforceable or a timeline for repeat reporting back. I think that's what we're missing.
Yeah.
It's not like we're going to come up with anything that right now, maybe a couple of things we could think of that our staff is doing.
But I do think, Kelly, even though the district is doing some of these things, I think it gives it more weight if we establish this as a goal, because we know, goals are whatever, like it could be 3 to 5 years, it could be 3 years. And as we do the budget for the next, every year you do the budget. I know in the past when we've had no goals, the budget is like, it's like a mess because we have nothing to align it to. Because people can just say like, well, we'll hear from 10 people that something is important, And then we think that's important because we've heard these 10 people. Whereas if we establish the goals and we know that this is what's agreed upon, I don't know, I think it's a little bit easier to follow through with budgeting.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. I think I think things are already happening. I think we need to find out kind of what we can do to, get those data points or those those reporting back to us and accountability for it. We're missing the accountability. I'm not here to tell them how to do it. So I don't know, but
That's, I
I
agree with
can hold people accountable.
I agree with you, Kelly, because when you go back to what Marie went over at the very beginning, our role is to set the goal. And then, like you said, oversight and evaluate. So we say we want to be there, and then you guys figure it out how best to get there and report back to us. You're absolutely right. And then we need to set some time frame for finding out how we're doing. Absolutely, I agree with you.
Maybe instead of a goal, we could call it a vision that we have, and then we can describe how we're going to follow through instead of calling it a goal and going through the whole procedure.
Well, we do have visions and
Well,
mission
we have a
statements.
mission and vision. I think this is what we talked about, I don't know, in January and then before that. I think everybody's in agreement with the district and the mission of the district. And that's broad enough where they're good, but then the goals give you something where you can actually see if we're working towards it.
And measure them.
The other stuff is really broad. So I have some other ideas for goals. Unless I can go, or I'll open it up first to other people if you have ideas.
Well, so circling back to the first one that you mentioned, the closing the achievement gap. So that's the goal. It sounds like we could probably fill in the strategies that are happening. Like,
well, we don't even have to worry about that. We'll let the
fill in strategies. So where do we kind of leave that? So how is it? And we kind of have to discuss since we don't know how to measure it. Maybe.
Well, I don't think we have to, Kelly. I think we set the goal. That's our job, set the goal, and then we turn it over to the experts and the professionals that we've hired to do that work.
Right.
So that would be like Marie and the district coming up with
the leadership team.
Right. Yeah, because we don't work there, we wouldn't know what. But what we would do is hold it accountable. So
we want to see it. We want to see the plan.
If we agree, let's say, just for example, that goal is something that we establish as a goal, then, in the board meetings, we say, where's the work on this going? And, Marie would tell us, well, we've done X, Y, Z, or we're still working on X, Y, Z. Or if they say, oh, we haven't really done anything about this.
Yeah.
We'd be like, all right, well, we want to make progress toward this goal. So it's a way to check.
And I would expect that we would see an action plan laid out before, as the year starts, and what that team plans to do, so that we can see where they're heading, and then we can check. We can check with them every so often. How are things going? Where are you moving to? What's working? What's not working? So we can ask questions.
So the only other place I think we would need direction is, I don't think we can close the achievement gap 100% in a year. Matter of fact, I'm quite sure we can't. And if we could write a book and we'd all be rich and famous. So
the wording needs to be.
It's like, so we would close the achievement gap by some percentage, and I don't know if it's 10%, 20%, 15%, and by when. So, by July 2021. I don't remember the data right now to know how far behind they are.
That would be good to figure that out.
But it seems to me here's the tricky part of this. The data that we looked at was pre-pandemic. And I don't know, as I think Barbara pointed out, that those kids may have been at point A in January or at that data point, but they might be bigger.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So I think what I would suggest is that you let us take a look at that and let's see just how big that gap is and what is reasonable to say we've done a year from now.
I think the key is what is achievable and what is
in a year.
And what's achievable, what's measurable.
Yeah.
Shows the achievement
Yeah.
gap is not measurable, given, those 4 words or whatever, is not a measurable goal. If you want to focus
Right.
on it, let's.
And in the normal year, we could say, oh, we want to see the gap change by whatever percentage by looking at the ESSA data and this data and this data. But we have no idea what we're looking at. So maybe Marie, if you could tell us, what that gap is first, and then maybe give us guidance in the terms of the metric, because that I'm assuming is going to be different this year.
Right.
And then we could clarify that goal. And I can write this down as a goal. I'm kind of taking notes. It doesn't have to be 100% set, but if you agree or disagree, or you want to say something, I'll write up these notes at the end, and then we can work from there. I have some other ideas for goals that I can share, unless somebody else wants to share. Otherwise, I'll go ahead.
Well, I have one more thing just to
Sure.
discuss a little bit. We had talked ad infinitum and had been making pretty good progress on our later school start time.
Barbara, you're going to get what you were looking for. Trust me.
And I just don't want that shelved somewhere and, put aside. As I said, we had made some really good progress, and I think we're almost at a tipping point, and then COVID hit, and, who knows what's going to happen. But I just want us to maintain our focus on that and the fact that it is so much better for kids, and let's just keep it in the forefront if we could.
I think the draft reopening plan.
I just have to say this will be a news flash to people who are looking. Based on our staggered start times and our no more than 20 kids per bus, it doesn't look like the high school is going to start before 10 a.m.
Oh my God.
10.
So if you guys want information right now,
So they should all do great next year, right? Based on that,
Goal achieved.
we just closed the achievement gap.
so it won't last at 10 forever. But I do agree with you, Barbara, that I think once we get, over this crazy August, we need to get the committee back. We need to go back and look at it. But we will have a later start time in 2021.
So the goal, that could be a strategy or something that they use, like the start time. But if am I frozen?
No,
you're
No.
good.
No.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
You're frozen,
Um,
apparently.
So maybe we can, I think we talked before about something about the whole child, or thinking about the whole child, and that could be a strategy under that.
It is actually a strategy. It's not a goal. What you're asking the problem, what problem are we solving? That's the goal we're setting. So,
Yes.
so we are going to, and I'm making this up because I haven't really thought about it in this framework, but if the problem is we have sleep deprived children who are underperforming, we're addressing those concerns.
Yeah. An physical, emotional, psychological need.
I like putting that out there as a goal, Barb. Say it could even be, by the end of 2021, have a process for 2022 to implement our strategy of later start times. That gives a year to recuperate and a year to reset, and then we're good in 2022. I don't know if that's way off or too far, but it might be realistic. But we could use lessons learned through COVID to
Through this.
that might change. You might change your whole perspective on this stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So that could be a goal right there. By 2022, implement, later start times. It's achievable. It's measurable. It's something
For
you
high
talk
school,
about forever.
for high school.
Right? So might need a little massaging, but that might be it.
Yeah, I can write. Can you hear me now? Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, clean kill
Well,
one.
I'll write that down and we can fix the language. But I think, this is something we've been talking about for a while. And I don't think you meant 10 o'clock, Barb, but whenever it gets back to normal, not going back to the original start time.
Yeah. Just
right.
one more thing that we have talked about and we sort of implemented at the middle school is that mental health clinic. And then again, in light of COVID and all the stresses that these kids have been under, could we put as a goal enhancing or at least reviewing our mental health efforts, on behalf of the kids?
I
it needs
think
to be
a,
specific.
a goal could be like a commitment to health and wellness, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That
Which
actually
would
probably
include-
would
Then you would measure that by how many kids have access or
Right.
how many visits to the social workers.
How many suspensions?
counselors- Right.
It might be a year of gathering data and seeing what the needs are,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't really, maybe don't know now what my kids might need
Right.
based on their experiences with this.
Right.
But maybe gathering data and being attentive to that kind of data, absenteeism, whatever, and then looking at that and saying, next spring, do we need to implement something more?
So we do have a
Um,
comprehensive counseling plan that Lisa Knowles in a large group of stakeholders, including people within the district and professionals outside the district, like from Northern Rivers and, from a variety of entities. They have a plan that looks at all of that, the data, the strategies, the timeline
Great.
that we're required to have.
mhm.
So we might want to do some oversight with that. We might want to have a report on it, and so we can, kind of question or give suggestions or.
Well, is it actually a problem at this point? Is
Right,
there
it may
some
not
kind of
be.
data that says that we're having an issue with this, or is it
We don't know.
like where is it coming from? Just general thoughts from the news, or go ahead, Blanca.
Anecdotally, it's very bad.
Is it bad at
Yeah.
Portland? What tells you that? Teachers, students,
Everybody.
Doctors.
Well, I'm just
Yeah,
curious. Well, how do you measure a goal if you don't know what you're measuring or
Right.
don't know what the problem is?
Kelly, I do think we have some challenges here as measured by numbers of students with chronic absenteeism,
Okay.
hospitalizations for mental health reasons, disciplinary kinds of things. There's a host of data points that would tell us that we have students who are struggling.
Cool.
I'll
Yeah,
ask-
That's all the background that
And I
what's the
imagine it would get worse. It could be getting worse with what's happening. So that would be my guess.
I
So-
agree.
I'm wondering, I've been struggling a little bit to figure out what our program reports are going to be about this year because I haven't had a lot of cognitive space. Maybe I can have Lisa do an update on the work of the committee and their counseling plan,
That would be
comprehensive
great.
counseling plan.
Okay. I also had recruit and retain a diverse workforce by developing some type of hiring process or developing a hiring process plan. I don't know. I know I think I've done a couple search committees for the district, and we had to have like maybe a little bit of background on what the position is. And I don't know if there's more that happens at the district level that I'm not involved in, but maybe part of that process or, part of that hiring process is to develop a plan to address this because it's something that we know that the district's already been working on. We know that it's a challenge. We know it's not unique to Guilderland.
Right.
And I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think that's an excellent one. But I think you're right. It's more in terms of designing some strategies to try out and then report back how are they working, to look at what might be the obstacles that we're meeting. And then talk to people who are out there looking for jobs and find out what are the ways that we could attract.
I looked a little bit into this. I'm sorry, Marie, you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, the goal is probably not a process, but an outcome. So the sample SMART goal I created, the goal was to have 2 individuals of color apply to open positions in order to increase the pipeline. I don't know if that's realistic or not.
We'll find out.
But I think that's more of a result as opposed to we've come up with a plan or we've created a new process. Just to stick on the measurable goal piece, because it's easy to come up with a process. Process may not result in anything.
So do we have to say a number, Marie? I feel like when we say I feel like we're just trying to fill something versus to have
Right.
data on the applicant, like the data on the demographics of the applicants, and then to increase the diversity of the demographics of the applicants or something like that. I don't know. You guys would know better than I would on how to phrase that.
Hey Marie, are you familiar with the Take a Look at Teaching program? Have you heard of that? So, in talking with, I don't know, my wife, she brought this up as a thing that's happening out in Buffalo where I know we're kind of getting granular into it, but it's a global thing of the program is focusing on the students, people of color, and taking them, telling, hey, take a look at teaching, and then partnering with local universities like St. Rose, who I don't know has a focus on teaching, like growing our own. It's kind of, really kind of. Are you familiar with that?
Grow your own initiative, but I
Yep.
think, like you said, Kelly, that's getting granular. Like, I know some of that just because of work, but I feel like the people who are working at the district who are working on this should be the ones that say this is what we're doing, like accountable to us.
Right.
Just want to throw it out there, or something I was thinking about, because I thought I wasn't even thinking about looking at it that way. So it's a big thing to start and to do. So I'm just wondering if just want to throw it out there as a thing that's happening that I thought was really great.
It is, and I won't word walk too much, but this is an interesting story. I was at a workshop on this very topic, and the presenter was a Black gentleman who was a teacher and now is a professor and consultant. And he did this study where he asked current teachers at what age someone said to them, "Have you ever thought about being a teacher?" And for white teachers, it was 8, 9, and for Black teachers, it was 22, 24.
Wow.
I don't have the data exactly right in my head, but the invitation to the profession is disparately given out.
And that's the kind of change that needs to happen. Like that's it right there.
Yeah, because I totally agree with you, Kelly. It's an active approach. It's not passive, right? It's like actively trying to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like the state ed department has like grants too, where they try and support teachers of color to.
Right.
So there is support there, but it's so I don't know how you would phrase it, Marie, where we're talking about not the process, but what are we trying to reach at the end?
Well,
I say diversified workforce, I think.
Yes.
But you have to deal with the process. If we want a different outcome, we have to change what we're doing. So we have to state what the process is going to have to change if we want the outcome to be different. So I think it is a process, and what do we want to see as the outcome? We're hoping that the process we set up now will give us a better outcome. So I think that is it is important to look at our process.
Yeah, like I don't know what the process is now, like with the whole plan in terms of
Right. But we
hiring. But let's say that there's an unintentional bias type training that I'm just giving an example. I'm not an expert in this, but that would be an example of, we're developing a plan for hiring practices. Part of that plan includes unintentional bias training or something like that.
Yeah.
So the district would have to create that piece,
right.
but we're saying that. But we're saying, that we want to have a plan or something that they're showing us that they're addressing this.
Yeah, that we try some different things to see what works and what we might do differently. Because obviously we're not.
Well, right in the beginning, Marie said we had, I think it was 26% non-white students, and is it 1% or 2%?
It's low.
So
less than
the
1%.
goal could be increase it to 2%, or something as that. I mean, that's measurable and that's specific and that's maybe achievable. Hopefully that's achievable.
Yeah.
and then Marie and the staff could work on some ideas.
How to do it. Yeah.
I mean, it could be that simple. Increase
Yeah.
it by, yeah,
Double
1%
it.
in 1 year and
Double it.
5% and double it. There you
Let's
go.
double
You
it.
know, or 5% in 5 years.
Let's try to double it in a year.
And we could revisit
I
it.
don't know.
It's not realistic. Revisit it next year.
Right.
I was going to say, maybe we don't know the number just by randomly guessing the percentage that we want to increase it, but maybe that's some homework that we have to do, is go back and see what would be like the right percentage that we're trying to aim for. And none of these so far, we've talked about a timeline. I just read a little bit about, I guess, goal setting before this, and we were talking about like 3 to 5 years as a goal. That doesn't mean that we don't measure along the way, but
Mhm.
a lot of these things take time for actual change to occur. So I don't know if we want to stick to that for all of them, or think about this and come back later about the timeline, but that's something also to.
Yeah, something like the achievement
Yeah.
gap thing might be a 3-year goal, and we might monitor it every, twice a year or something. But other ones might be
Might
year.
depend on the goal.
exactly.
I have a
wanted-
comment, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I just think as we set our goals and as we try to figure out a way to measure everything, we really need to keep in mind that we're in a pandemic. So what we experienced this year may not reflect, how good of a goal it was, or how well we worked at achieving that goal. So I'm almost hesitant to set goals that are going to begin during the pandemic, to be honest with you, unless they're like very long-term, because I really feel like the pandemic is just impacting everything. It's going to impact a lot of the things that you brought up today. So that's my 2 cents, unsolicited.
Right. I mean, the way I think it's a good point, Blanca. The way I see it is that school is not going to be normal this year, and potentially, I don't know how many years, but definitely not this year. So there has to be some change in curriculum. There has to be some change in the way school is happening. So if it's kind of deconstructed already, why not include? I feel like instead of aimlessly putting it back together, because we have to work on getting school back to normal, why not include those pieces in now when we have the opportunity to do it? But you're right, like there's probably only so much we could do while we're trying to just get back to normal.
Well, having things like, you never know, maybe having a virtual online teaching recruitment thing might bring in people from far away that we never even thought about doing before.
Right.
You never know. You might be on the phone with somebody from California that's like, yeah, I'll up and move to New York. That's a great deal. We never even reached out to them. Now we have this forum that we're all getting so used to. Maybe it'll help for that. No idea. But I think a 1-year goal is a little pushing it for anything at this point. I think you need to focus on, masks at the moment. Like that's enough to focus on for the next year. But I think a 3 to 5 year goal, and then revisit it next year during the next time we have an election, or next summer. Okay, we got nowhere on these goals. Okay, let's restart them. Is it really measurable? Is it really,
Well, also, sometimes when things are up in the air and a little uneasy, it's a good time to make change, and maybe we'll see opportunities. So I think somebody said we need to be flexible because things will change, constantly. So, but I think having the goals is something that can guide us, keeping our eyes open for opportunities.
I do think that because of the phone call that I know I wasn't part of, but we keep referring back to, and we recently got that email from parents that want to be on a committee. I don't know how we want to address this, but I think we need to come up with some type of goal where that all of these pieces that we're kind of talking about informally fall under that goal. So I'm open to suggestions, or I can come up with some.
I would say that, we had a task force on the late start. I think a task force on diversity, we already have some members from the community who have, expressed an interest. Obviously, a number of us as board members have expressed an interest. It's a very simple goal: establish a task force to improve, the curriculum, the hiring, and
I think the educational and cultural environment of our district.
right, exactly.
And
And that would be very
Yeah.
easily measurable. Did we have meetings? Did we,
And people could apply to the committee, write a letter.
Right.
What would you bring to the committee? Why will you be interested? And I think that would be a great opportunity.
I do think that that's great to measure, Barb. So I wrote that down because that's one that's easy at least to say that we've done or not done. But I do think we should acknowledge that this is a piece of a bigger goal that we're trying to achieve for the district. Because I can tell you from my own work, my own perspective, that if create a task force or hire an equity, I would like do one thing to say that we're checking off the box of addressing diversity is like where it goes to die. Because I think I said before, it gets siloed. That's one piece. So I think we should do this, but also somehow acknowledging the goal that it's part of a bigger picture of what we would like the goal to be in the district. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I think, Seema, I would agree with you that the hiring of, quote, an equity officer to me is like, okay, we checked it off. This person's in charge of it now, and everybody wipes their hand and washes their hands of the problem. But I think putting a task force together where the community is involved, parents, staff, and all together working on this, that to me is more systemic change. It can make big changes in the district. If you've got a group of people, 25 or 30 or whatever, consistently working, raising questions, pushing, that can be a really powerful change agent.
Yeah, and I'm saying not either. I'm not saying or. I'm saying both.
Yes.
Or what else, that we're addressing this bigger issue, this bigger problem that we know that we need to work on.
Right.
And here are several ways to achieve that.
Yeah.
So
And the
this task force or a board appointed committee, because task force to me seems like it's more temporary, like a pandemic task force. Like, well, hopefully that's somewhat temporary.
Well, we have a facility. Sometimes they're short term. I think it depends on how the board sets it up.
Yeah.
We set up like the start time task force. We did the facilities one.
Yeah.
We set it up for a limited time. So we might make this not that we might not put, a time limit, but more a task or goal for them.
Yeah, a task force. Yeah, it implies that there's one task. I get it, Seema. This is so
Maybe
global.
it's a commission.
Commission, yeah.
Or what about a committee? So like we have a business practices committee and a communications committee. What about an equity or social justice committee?
Yeah, it has to be ongoing. This is not going away. This is not going to go away a year, 5 years, 10 years. It's going to be an ongoing thing for.
Yes, and it needs to
Really,
be. It needs to be.
So, yeah.
No, I was going to say, I have no problem with the task force because multiple voices coming from various perspectives can certainly add to the conversation, redirect the conversation perhaps. Recent graduates, whatever. I think the more you involve people, the better the results are going to be. And you don't have to make it, time limited. We could set it up for a year. You could extend it if they're working well together and we're achieving things as a district. There's nothing that says that they have to go away or fold up shop. But I think it's a fantastic way to continue the conversation and to really get multiple voices.
Yes.
And, people I'm sure are willing and able. And I just have great faith in reaching out to the community and, sort of following their lead and getting as much information as we can.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of making an actual board committee because then it's gonna stay. Like we have a task force, it could be with high school parents and then their kids graduated and then they're like, they're retired out in, Florida. If we make it a board, part of the board policies, then board members come and go, but that committee is always there. We could rotate people in and out. A task force, parents are going to leave, they're going to move.
But you could set the task force.
During.
You could set the task force up that set, so many percentage parents, so that when parents do leave, then you bring new community members in.
Yeah,
The audit committee has
during
The parents.
community members on it.
Right.
So it could be similar to that and have community members as well as board members and administrators.
That's what I was thinking too, Rebecca, that one of the committees, I couldn't remember which one had community members anyways. So I don't know why it would have to be different. but I do agree with whoever said, I don't know if it was Kelly, that to give it weight is to have it board appointed and to be there, because it's going to continue to change as demographics keep changing. As you know, this is clearly from the phone call that something should have been there for a while.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I haven't heard from Ben, Luciano. I just want to make sure you guys have input as well. You don't have to. I'm just making sure that you.
No, no, it's fine. This is great conversation. It's not an easy answer. I think that's why we're struggling to come up with one concrete thing. Another idea that I've thought of is creating like a student organization to also address this. If we could have students involved, maybe they feel more comfortable talking with other students. Maybe they could come up with they could create like a student-run event for other students where they could educate other students. You know, that's just another thing to throw out there.
Mhm.
I think they're
I
absolutely
agree. I think we need student voice in this. We spoke a lot today with our leadership team about empowering student voices. So, I mean, we have a variety of clubs and activities at the middle and high school that are linked to this idea, but maybe not, really all about social justice. I thought that phrase, social justice, is the way to go, because the diversity, if you remember those definitions, is just about number. And I don't think we just want to talk about numbers. I think we want to talk about how we correct the problems of the past, create a better place.
Mm-hmm.
But that also is equity. It's not necessarily just social justice. It's equity, that we want all kids to succeed, all kids to be treated equally, all kids to feel that they belong.
Well,
You
the
know,
equity is our responsibility to make sure our policies and our practices
Mhm.
allow for that. So we can
Right.
do that as a board, but changing people's behaviors and mindset, those are very, that you just can't legislate it and say, okay, put it in words on a policy and then it's going to happen. It's not going to happen. That's the hard work of, and that's why the social justice piece, because that's the action. How do you?
I think a social justice board committee, an enduring, like written into this is going to continue until we stop it, is awesome. And like I don't know if we should keep circling back to all kids. I like all kids, but it kind of is reminiscent of all lives type of thing, where like we're not really, all lives matter. Okay, I'm gonna go out there and say that, but like that's not really what we're focused on right now. So I don't know if drawing it back to all kids is almost rings too many bells.
I think Luciano. Sorry.
So,
Go ahead, Ben.
some of the equity pieces that we may or may not find we need or enact or whatever, they do benefit all students, right? I mean, if we come to the conclusion that, the no hat policy at the middle school is, colonialist, and not considering other cultures and stuff, well, it benefits every child to that, that we change that policy that says there's no hats. If we start introducing more restorative justice models in our schools, that's equity amongst all peers, and I think the whole point of this discussion is really not even, just Black students, but really all people of color from all cultures, from all traditions, who have, who should be accommodated, in our system. So, to Kelly's point, I just wanted to respond to that. This isn't just for one group of students, although that is the group of students that may need the most change. These changes aren't just for them.
I think, Luciano, you brought up a great point about having that student voice, and like Marie said, to empower student voices. So I think if we talk about this, I mean, we don't have to flesh the details of the committee piece now about the committee for diversity, et cetera, but maybe there is I know that I don't think our other committees have students involved, but I mean, is there a policy against having students involved in the committees? Can we, include representation from the student body on this committee? There might be other things that happen at the building level, but this would also be a way to bring it back to the board is by being involved in this committee. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
I think if
I
we're
think it's
creating the task force, we can make it up. The makeup is up to us. And I think the student voice is absolutely essential because and I think we have to have other voices too that aren't going to, because I really think sometimes we as a group will make assumptions that are not true. So we have to have that other voice that's going to challenge what we say even. I don't know how we do that, whether we have people from outside look at what the community comes up with. But we've really got to be challenging ourselves to find the people that will challenge what we're doing too.
I
So
think
that we don't create the same problems.
What's your not filing?
Go ahead. If we create this, people will come. I can think of 10 people right now. We're gonna have a committee of 50 in like a second. I promise
That's
you.
great.
Like, so it might be a select committee, or it might be representatives from a community, like different leaders of groups or leaders of students. I think it'll catch on pretty fast.
See, I think the thing of a task force and a community group, I think back to when our illustrious consultant decided that we should close Altamont Elementary School. And then we set up a task force, trying to, how we're going to use the spaces in our buildings. And again, that was to me a great example of the community getting together, dividing themselves into various groups within the task force, and then, presenting before the board what they thought were viable solutions, versus closing the school. And I see this almost as the same way, that you're going to open it up to as many people as are interested in the issue. There's going to be some fall off. That's just endemic to any type of a task force. But then within that task force, there may be some that are more geared toward personnel issues. There's maybe more geared to curriculum and investigating, what we should be teaching. There may be others that are more interested in the health parts of the equity issue. Others may be more concerned about the, the internet access and things such as that. So I'm leaning towards a task force versus a committee of the board, because in a committee of the board, you can only have 4 members or 5 members, or then it becomes a meeting of the whole board. There are all these nuances. Whereas if you have a task force that reports to the board, that the board is a part of, that students can be part of, teachers, whoever's interested, to me, that's a broader coalition, for what we're trying to achieve, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we call it the
This might
coalition.
just-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this might just be a language piece. I think we're all in agreement that we want to be inclusive of community members, board members, and students, probably teachers too.
Yeah.
But in the way I don't see it the same as the Altamont school piece is that was like a localized, that was like a time, that was something specific. And once that decision was made either way, you move on. This is not in that same
This is a much longer
way.
term.
It might be just
This
a
is
verbiage.
ongoing.
It's a words thing for me. That's pretty much what it's
Yeah.
called. Coalition, whatever we can.
Social justice coalition.
That's gonna be enduring from board to board to teacher, as family member to family, whatever. When people leave districts, I just want it to endure. So whatever words we can come up with, that'd be better.
I like that term,
can
that
work-
social justice term. It says the work that focuses on systematic, transformative change.
And I like coalition just because I like it.
Yeah, social justice coalition or something like that. But the
Thematic.
title is
We can
mine.
work it out.
Yeah.
TikTok,
Is it
right?
premature to vote on this? It looks like
It's not-
everybody's all in. We all want it. We all want a committee.
We just have,
We
we're
all-
gonna agree on the goals, so.
I'll make
No.
it
Support the goal,
We don't know what we're making yet.
but we can
Yeah, I
agree that we want
Five
one.
People, or is it a board
Someone can figure
subcommittee
it out.
that's endure for generations. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think we should rush. I'm not, and
No.
I
I
don't.
don't want to, right.
Can we agree to the goal at least? Isn't that
Yeah,
what
I think
today's
we're,
about?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what I think we're doing here.
That's what we're
I
trying to come to.
apologize.
We're trying to agree to the goals before we leave tonight, at least the goals, maybe not the wording and
No, so
Yeah.
that would be one goal, that if we want to establish this coalition of community members to explore
Yeah.
the issues of equity and social justice, da 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 da.
Yeah, Blanca, I mean, I agree with you, but I think what my plan is to take, I'm writing down notes of what we're talking about and to maybe have like a cleaned up document that we go back that we can, think about for a little bit and edit. And then I wouldn't want to rush to vote on something without doing a little bit of more homework or getting more input. I know Damien's also not here. I know he couldn't be here. So to make sure that we have, I don't want to rush to vote.
yeah, there's no reason to rush.
I think what the board
Setting
would
the
vote
goal
on,
of this meeting though, right? Isn't that the goal of this particular meeting, is to set the goals? I think I just said goals like 10 times in a row. Our goal tonight is to set goals. And we've only been on the first one. So I was just trying to say, yeah, we all agree. We're all in for this first goal.
Well, we have 4.
No, am I wrong? That's not what this is about. Where we agree to them for.
No, it is. I think it is. I have 4 or 5 written down already.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's the first goal. I apologize. I don't know what's going on the internet. Just talking about technology, connectivity. Perfect
The only
example. Marie,
thing
what were you saying?
The only thing that I see of not establishing it as a goal, at least sort of as a cover goal, is that we may lose the momentum within the community. I think they'll still be there if we reconfigure in August or September, but I almost hate to waste the time between now and September. If, we could at least get some heads together and get some thought processes going.
Well, we're supposed to meet
How
in
I
August.
see this,
so
this is the first draft. I don't want to submit the first draft to the journal. Like this is our messy first draft. I feel like we need to just clean it up before we actually put it out there on the record and vote on it. That's all.
and practical matter, there is no way we can start a task force work now.
Before
Before September.
I mean, we're buried. I can't state that strongly enough. And I think we need to be thoughtful about how the work goes. But it seems to me that, if we can look at the framework for this, and I would be, Seema, I'd also be happy to take a stab at putting together, like a charge to the coalition kind of thing. And as we've done in the past, that the board could, agree to when we meet again, and then get the word out to the community that we're soliciting letters of interest to serve on this. And I can see it happening early in the fall, and I don't think we'll lose momentum. People right now are crazed about what's going to happen with kids going back to school. Just trust me on this.
Me,
Yeah.
I'm one of those. I know people at home are hoping that that'll come up too.
So I have 5 goals, I think, written from what we've talked about. We can either keep going, but I know it's close to 7 and just want to respect people's time. So we could either spend a little bit more time and come up with a couple more, or I can take this, clean it up, and make it a Google Doc, and you guys can just add your input. I'll just have editing for everybody.
Seema, you can go over the 5 in a minute. I have 4 down, but do we want to have the one about facilities and the one about cybersecurity and safety?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think we've touched those.
Those are the
And
only
not that we
2.
have to.
No, but
Not that we,
Facilities. So, something that I've talked about a couple times before is, a lot of times when we throw up a capital project, we don't really have, it's repairs to, 50-year-old cabinetry and, 30-year-old labs and things like that. But really we need to do more than just be keeping up, because we're keeping up with school buildings from the 1950s. So, my thought was, to create an actual vision for what buildings look like in the future. Kind of, like is it Glens Falls that has or Queensbury
Queensbury.
that has that beautiful high school. Obviously the goal would be to pass the capital project, that would come with this. But I think what I'm kind of saying is that particular capital project should be, school of the future capital project instead of, the parking lots need to be repaved kind of capital project, and that we should actively explore what schools should look like in the future, getting feedback from teachers and students and people who are in these schools right now, to kind of say, what we have was good for 30 years ago, and what we need 10 years from now is X. Here's this vision that we have, and really get people to buy into it, and then to pass our capital project.
I'm totally in agreement, Ben. Like, especially if we're talking now also about the safety piece too with facilities. Like I remember talking about in one of those Reimagine meetings with social distancing and how in elementary schools we bought tables for years instead of desks, and now we're like, oh, we need to have kids socially distance from each other. So not saying that it's going to go one way or the other, but to basically what you're talking about, to rethink how the school buildings are structured and think about what's coming up for the future, and knowing that we know that a lot of the buildings that we have are old and kind of falling apart. So why not take advantage at the same time?
Right. Instead of treading water, pick a direction, have a goal, and share it. And right, as we're replacing the ceiling tiles at whatever school, we can also make the upgrades instead of just the repairs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's an education piece about this with the community, because that was our problem when we lost that budget and we had to go back and take things out, because I don't think people really understood that term future ready classroom. So there's an education piece that has to come in there so people understand, why it is that the classrooms of 50 years ago aren't going to work for, kids today in the future that they're going to be facing.
Well, maybe as a first step to this, we take a field trip to Queensbury and talk with them about the 4 or 5 years of groundwork they laid before they went to a vote.
Yeah.
I happen to know the superintendent there very well, and I've had a conversation with him before. So if we want to,
that would be great. Get
a school bus and go up and take a visit, he'd be welcome. He'd be happy to have us.
Could we do it in the summer while we're?
I would want to see how crazed he is right now. I have a theory. I just want to be respectful of that, but I'm sure it could be, maybe in September. Let's get this ship rolling, and before the snow flies.
Mm-hmm.
It might be worth a field trip too for our other goal about the social justice and the inclusion, to look at that school that Damien gave us the information about it, Needham, Massachusetts. That sounded like a wonderful place to just talk to people about some of the things they've done.
If we don't get to cybersecurity tonight, that's fine, or we can, but I want to make sure we talk just a little bit about what Gloria and what we talked about on Friday. I think what we said was to have at least some of these goals, or if we have more than 3, rotate the goals through the board meeting agendas to include them, to kind of keep it on our mind as to, what's happening with them. Yep. And then meet somewhere in the middle of the year like this, or, set a special meeting aside to reevaluate where we are on the goals. It doesn't have to be this. I'm just throwing out an idea. I don't know what you guys think, but I don't want to not have a plan in terms of, we set this and then we never go back and look at it.
Well, you know how Damien always, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I like your suggestion a lot about putting a Google Doc up where we can kind of write out some of this a little bit more instead of bouncing around in a conversation where we all kind of agree with each other, but more of having the paper in front of us.
Sure.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yep, I'll do that. Gloria, what were you going to say something?
That's fine. It's okay.
Okay. I mean, what do you guys think after we come up with goals, depending upon the number of goals that we have for this academic year, we figure out how many we're going to put on an agenda for each board meeting, just to kind of keep them on our radar as to what we've talked about that we value and that
We
we're going
usually
to
meet,
look at.
twice a month, so we can easily, just do a check-in, but make sure it's on the agenda, check-in. Damien, very often in his report, some of it's going to come up there, and he could give a report on certain goals could come up under that. But just so we touch base every meeting on some, at least half the goals. So in the month, we've at least talked about.
And then mid-year, have a special meeting like this, and at the end of the year, another meeting to basically see where we've gone. Do we need to adjust anything? Are things not realistic? That kind of thing. Because I guess the one thing about the board, right, is that people could always be changing. So if we don't have like regular things to talk about the goals, then I think it can just be forgotten about.
I know, Seema, we talked about with Marie a template of some sort. We were talking about that. So I think it would be important as we're fleshing out the goals that we have that template and we start filling it in. Maybe that's the Google Doc we're talking about too, that Ben was referring to, that we have that available so that it's a living thing and growing, so that each month we're taking a look at that template and saying, it's changed in this much, or we've added this.
And I think, did we already vote correct, right, about the board meetings for this upcoming year? So maybe we can set aside the dates that we already have, or put another one in there so we can establish these dates that we're talking about. Because I know what'll happen is it'll be April, May. Oh, we never met in the middle of the year.
Yeah, you're right. Put it in the calendar.
I think we need to establish those dates ahead of time, but I can put ideas on the Google Doc.
Are we meeting in August?
August 11th.
Yeah.
And the focus of that one is?
It's a regular board meeting.
Okay.
A regular board meeting?
Wow. Regular?
So there likely will be quite a few action items because we will not have met for a long time. And
right.
I would imagine there will be quite a bit of conversation about opening of school plans. And I think it will be a busy night.
Right, because that will be after the governor announces what the plan is. Oh, go ahead, Blanca, sorry.
I was going to say what you just said, because
7.
I do wonder, is it something to consider maybe to have a special board meeting to focus on that, so that once the decision comes from the governor, we at least have an idea of what we want to do? Or is there some kind of venue or opportunity to hear from folks in the community? That's what I'm hearing from people the most about right now. Diversity, yes, but what the heck is happening in the fall, and can we know as soon as possible? So I just wonder, will having a regular board meeting sort of cut the mustard? Will we have enough time? And will that lend itself to hearing from folks? So I know that a lot of it's up to the governor, but he's also already mapped out a plan which gives us flexibility district to district. Someone was saying something, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, people respond to our survey. We have 6 focus groups, committees that are comprised of people in the community, as well as faculty, staff, administrators, who are putting together our plan. So it's 120 people who are working on a plan, and we've got a group working on facilities related things, another on instructional related things, another on social emotional learning, another on health and safety, another on extracurricular athletics and special areas, and then another on HR. And they've been meeting at least weekly and recent, and now more, because we have to submit our plan on the 31st of July, so a week from Friday. So we really cannot reach out to our community and say, well, what do you think we should do?
So,
I mean,
but when do we get to see the plan?
well,
as a board member.
so I have in draft right now a framework that I'd like to share with the community in theory in the next day or so. But the facilities committee just met today and the HR committee is meeting tomorrow, and we have thousands of details to figure out because we are upending just about everything in order to maintain 6-foot social distancing and all the things we have to do to screen people. And, it's, I don't even know, I don't have an adjective for it. It is so immense. So what Amy Perrott and I were talking about in between the retreat and tonight was releasing this framework of the plan, which talks about the basics of health and safety, the basic framework for when we would have in-person school for our K-12 children, the basics of our transportation plan, the basics of, our operations. And then we're thinking about, do we do kind of a live stream town hall kind of thing? And so I just ran out of time to have that conversation with her before we started at 5:30 tonight. So I'd like to do that before we submit a plan to state ed. But the reality is we have to submit a plan by the 31st. It's going to meet all the things that we have to do. And it's very likely going to be tweaked between July 31st and September 8th. Because there are just too many things we have to sort out. Like the middle and high school have to rebuild their schedules from scratch. They usually spend 6 months doing that, and they're going to do it in 4 days.
So, Marie,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work.
Yep.
And I respect that. But I'm concerned that it looks with the turnaround time, folks may not get to see it. And I'm not even sure at this point if that includes me as folks or Board of Education members. And also, I just wonder, because I'm not part of these committees and I don't know, and I haven't heard what the plan is, what the plans or the ideas are. Has anyone considered that maybe it's not a good idea to reopen? Are all of these plans focused specifically and solely on reopening? And at any point in time, did anybody consider not reopening? I'm just asking.
Well, ultimately, the governor is the one with the valve, and he's going to tell us on August 1st through 7th whether or not we can or cannot open. So our plans right now, I will say, are largely focused on opening, because if we don't open, we're going to go to remote, and our instructional committee is looking at, so what does remote instruction need to look like for next year? Honestly, that's simpler than trying to come back. It
Yeah.
is. I mean,
No, I believe you. I believe you.
the
I'm trying
logistics.
to be provocative here because I've heard all sorts of concerns and questions, and I share some of those opinions. So on the one hand, I anticipate as a public health professional, okay, that even if we go in person, at some point we're going to go remote.
Yeah,
And
probably.
so I wonder, is it more disruptive to start one way and then switch to the other than to let everybody know ahead of time so they can plan that we're just going to be remote and work within that plan to make sure that we have kids with special needs and meet their goals? So I'm not on those committees. I don't know what the plans are. I'm wondering, I'm being provocative. I wonder if that's been considered at all, or is it just, this is what we should do and reopen? So I'll leave it to you.
I mean, I think that we need to wait, right, until
The governor
first
tells us.
all of the districts hear from the governor, because otherwise it's just like a what if this, what if that, like we don't know, but we're all in the same situation and we all know that it's not going to be a perfect solution for everybody.
No,
Like that's just known. Like it's not going to be back to what it was this last year. Maybe hopefully at some point, but not right away. So I feel like, I mean, Marie can answer, but I feel like I would rather them spend the time figuring out those details to try and get them back there if the governor says yes and it's safe, then, because they already had an opportunity to have parents give input. I was at one of the focus group meetings. Now it's going to be, it's going to be August. They have to turn their plans to the state. I'd rather the time and effort be spent on those details, the thousands of details.
So we did hear from like 2,200 people, and I would say about 70+% of those, we didn't ask the question, will you send your children back to school or not? We asked the question, how comfortable are you returning your children to in-person school? And I would say 70% of those people said, in the middle, like we did it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being I'm totally uncomfortable and 5 being very comfortable. And 70% were at the 3 and up, which is I'm relatively comfortable or more. So, I mean, I don't know what it means per se, but I just know that we can't not have a plan to return. I mean, I think I'm obligated as a school superintendent to submit a plan to
And
return.
I'm not suggesting that we should. I'm saying we should also consider the other.
Yeah. I mean, what if a parent decides they don't want to send their child?
Right.
We have to have an alternative for
We
them.
do have to have an
Yeah.
alternative.
So
Yep.
what if a staff member, because of health concerns, can't come back?
Mhm.
We
How do
got a
we
plan for that too.
Yeah, I mean, this is unbelievable planning.
I just feel like time's getting tight on it. And I'm not faulting anyone in the town. I'm saying in general, I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And our numbers right now are higher than when we went on pause. So
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that 5% threshold. To me.
I think I'd be shocked to find someone who's not comfortable or who is comfortable.
Who is comfortable?
Like as we get closer to August, actually earlier today, and because I'm dealing with this also at work, returning as a faculty member, just thinking, can I just escape to an island somewhere? That's where it was today. But yeah, I feel like the August meeting I think we should probably, it'll be a longer meeting to talk about these things.
Marie, I have a question. In that instructional subcommittee that you have, are there going to be requirements on the part, particularly of our elementary teachers, that they would have to be in contact with the students X number of hours a day or whatever? Because there was such disparity between what some teachers did and what others did. Some made contact with their kids every day in the morning at least, and gave them lessons to do and stuff, and others once or twice a week. So is there going to be any uniformity in what is being expected of the teachers from day to day?
You mean if we're remote?
Yes.
So that committee is, one of the big pieces of feedback from our focus groups was an interest in consistent expectations and more routine-like schedules. Actually, for kids, it was K-12. We heard that. So I haven't been in Damien's committee, but I do think that they are talking about some general parameters for expectations on how much live connection there is across classrooms and across buildings, because it was, it was not consistent. So
Right.
yeah, the short answer.
Thank you.
I think that finishes the agenda for tonight. I will draft these goals that we talked about, and I'll make it editable for all of you, just like you said, Ben, and so people can add their comments on there, and then this will be a working draft. And hopefully in August, then we can vote on some of these goals, or maybe clear them up to establish them for this year. But I imagine that August will be a long meeting with this and returning to school. So,
well, if we can get the Google Doc going, we can all maybe we can get it in a form that we're all comfortable with. So if everybody contributes, that then on August 11th, we could actually accept them. And then,
Yep.
I still think we should go out beyond the year and just give ourselves some time. But
yeah, I think we're going
Yeah,
to
they don't have to be just for this year, right? They could be
Right.
3 years or 5 years.
Oh,
And
yes.
still check in though periodically during the year. So I'll write this up and then I'll send the link to you guys so then you can add whatever you'd like.
Seema,
But
can I
otherwise,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. It's hard to
Okay.
know when to jump in. I just wanted to say two things really quick before we ended. I think, we really need to recognize how much work, not just Marie, but the administrators and all of the school district has done during the last 3 months. Like, I manage an office of 50 people, and it's been amazingly difficult. So I can't imagine managing across all of the schools, across all of the stakeholders, and there is no perfect plan. And I think we have to, recognize that and really recognize the work and how much, secondary traumatic stress can result from constantly evolving plans. So I just wanted to point that out. And the second thing is I wanted to ask about an in-person board meeting. And I know this came up and I want to be safe, but I go to work every day. So I think we can have meetings potentially with people in person that are safe.
I think we can definitely have it. I mean, we're
Yep.
sending kids back to school with masks on. The
Yep.
reason I preferred this because I've had meetings with 6 feet away with masks on, and it's almost more challenging to have these conversations that we're having. My preference wasn't for safety as much as I could see your eyeballs better here. I believe it or not.
Yeah.
So that was my preference. I know Blanca had a different preference, but
my concern is for safety, and I think we should look at the numbers and decide as we get closer. Because if we're starting to go back up, I don't think we should have them. I do think we have to hold ourselves to the same standards as our students, and I don't think we should send them back now either. My 2 cents, respectfully.
There was a comment in the survey about our meetings, board meetings, that if we're asking children to go back, then this meeting should happen in person.
There's a meme about it. Yes.
yes.
I reached out to SEMA just to kind of say, well, I mean, maybe some of us should show up in person, for this meeting because, right, for that point, if we're going to send kids,
yeah, and I
Well, we
would,
had-
we should show that the schools are safe, by going to the LTI and showing that it can be done.
And I'm in agreement. I would never say, oh, send your kids back. These are my kids too, without meeting in person. So I totally get that. I just want to Rebecca's point. I think when I first joined the board, when I saw what Marie's job is, superintendent, I was like, oh, now I know I never want to be superintendent.
Yeah, totally.
Now-
Dr.
Yeah,
White.
now in a pandemic, it's like, to me, that's like the worst job right now. So thank you for doing
Thank you, Marie.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marie.
So we had 23 of us together in person today for our retreat. We were in the large gym. We all brought our own chairs and we were 6-7 feet apart, masks. And, it was, and I can let Regan or Neil jump in. It was actually a really good day. And it was so good to see people again and get caught up in our socially distanced lunch that Regan cooked for us. So just 2 cents that I think if you plan for it and you provide enough real estate, you can give people the distance that they need.
All right, so respect everybody's time. I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Gloria, second. Barb, all in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Aye, passes 9-0. Thanks, everybody.
Good seeing
Good
you
night.
all.
Have a good